I'm wearing a 3D printed tie. That's why I look like a doofus. But I also wearing this shirt, which is also why I look like a doofus. So what did I want to talk about today? I want to talk about you guys. Peter, you make things in an instant, right, at Shapeways? How long does it take to make an object if you send it to you guys and you make it?
It depends a bit on the material, but in plastics we can do it in under 24 hours. We have a rush service now that ships the next day. Typically lead times are between 3 and 5 days for plastics and a little bit longer for metals and ceramics.
Okay. Could you actually 3D print this shirt? Like a harder shirt. I want like a breastplate.
Sure, we can work on that. Yeah,
Right,
with Nervous, we made a beautiful, actually flowing dress, the kinetic dress. So if we can make a dress, we can make a shirt for you.
Sure. All right, let's do it.
Yep.
Greg, tell us a little bit what you're up to at Make.
Sure. So Make, we're a media company. We focus on helping people learn about making and celebrating the maker movement and its impact. So we run maker fairs around the world. We do 150 events around the world, hopefully 1 million people coming to maker fairs somewhere. We publish Make magazine and several other books and digital properties, and then we have a commerce site where we sell kits and 3D printers and tools and supplies for the maker community.
And Mark, you're able to incapacitate a man with your bare hands, correct?
I am a former Green Beret. I have no idea what that has to do with here, but
All right. Well, that's
so I run TechShop, the largest chain of maker spaces in the world. We have 8 locations open now. We've got 4 that are being built as we speak.
okay. So what I wanted to talk about today, and I actually switched this up simply because of what happened. Ahmed Mohamed, and I guess it's Dallas. He was outside of Dallas. I don't know if you guys saw this story. He was kicked out. Is that my thing? Yeah, that's my thing. He was kicked out of school for bringing a clock inside of a briefcase. And he basically just took a clock apart, very similar to one of these clocks that are in front of us right now, put it in a briefcase and brought it to school because he thought it would be a lot of fun. And he got arrested. And it was, making is a crime. It was a very specific, Ahmed is Muslim, his family is in a small town in Texas. And there are multiple levels here. First, before we address that, I wanted to talk about the things that we did horribly as children. So why don't you start, Mark?
Well, so in junior high, there was at least this one week where we had an after-school program, self-directed. It was called Fun with Gasoline. So we found a can of gasoline and we played with it for a week. Put it in little bottles and hairspray. And
you managed to keep it
was a lot of
around
fun.
for a week.
Yeah, it was fun with gasoline.
Yourselves.
It was a blast.
Okay.
Yeah, my claim to fame is I read in a book that magnifying glasses can start fires. Turns out it's true. They can actually start good-sized brush fires in the backyard. People getting in trouble for doing this kind of thing, we've got some great stories. Steve Wozniak actually got arrested for a similar prank back in, I think it was 1967. He put a metronome in his friend's locker to sound like a bomb. And he spent the night in juvenile hall.
And what did you do?
I think the coolest and slightly dangerous thing is that I was into rockets when I was in my first year of high school. So I figured out to empty out fireworks into a little bit of a tube that looked like a rocket and try to make my own solid rocket. And a few of them really blew up. Luckily, I had a fuse, so I was a few yards away when it happened. But my parents always wondered whether the house would be around when they came back from grocery shopping.
Okay. And I did 2 things. I'm John Biggs, and I'm a maker. I dressed up in a hazmat suit and attached little LED lights all over my body, and we scared cars in the middle of the street in rural Martins Ferry, Ohio. And I also made a bazooka with an Estes rocket, and put it on my shoulder and put a moped helmet around my face, and shot it at the shed with my drunk Polish uncle. So that's what I did. Now, I would argue that we would all have been arrested or yelled at, or something bad would have happened to us. If somebody had seen me shoot a bazooka at a shed, how can we prevent making from becoming a crime? Do you want to start, or you want to start, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, this is such an incredible story on so many levels. It started with a 14-year-old kid getting arrested who became a hero. I mean, anyone who hasn't seen the hashtag I Stand With Mohammed I don't know where you've been. He's been invited to the White House. He's coming to Maker Faire in New York this weekend. And when we called to talk to him, they thought the lady on the phone was Ellen DeGeneres. I mean, he is a popular guy right now, and I think one of the reasons why the community has rallied to support him so strongly is because there is this growing sense that this kind of innovation and creativity needs to be celebrated across the board, but in particular in our schools and communities. And to see that go sideways so badly, it was really just shocking to so many people. And so it's been great to see the maker and broader community rally to his support. That said, it is a story that also has racial and religious overtones. So he went from arrested to hero to being attacked in certain quarters, which has made it a really important story for us to follow and be involved in.
I mean, there's the myth of we're nostalgic for the suburbs of yore back in the 70s when you can run around and like put pipe bombs in the street and go down hills really fast. And I feel like that those of us that survived those formative years, we learned a lot. What do kids have now that allows them to do the same sorts of potentially awful things, but actually really cool and educational things? And I guess you, Mark, you're doing a lot of that over the TechShop.
Yeah, I mean, we allow kids as young as 8 years old to come in to use our space. So they've got to be supervised. But we've worked with our insurance company very closely to make sure that these kids can be exposed to some pretty serious tools. The laser cutter can start a fire in a heartbeat if you don't know what you're doing. 3D printer, it's a little harder to get in trouble with that one. But you can create environments where kids are absolutely safe while exposing them to all kinds of really interesting and fun tools.
Mm-hmm. Peter, are you guys working on any STEM projects or anything?
Yeah, actually we updated our educational plan quite recently. It's now for everybody who has an educational email address or is in a school, and we can verify that the domain name is in a school. We offer them 20% discount, which in 3D printing land is pretty big.
Sure.
We basically want to give everyone who is studying the ability to use 3D printing at cost, basically.
Okay. What are you guys up to?
Yeah, we have something called Maker Camp, which is a free program for kids. We distribute it online. It's picked up by 1,000 affiliates around the world to run their own. The content's picked up to run their own camps. But I mean, I think more broadly, the making and the maker movement is starting to have an important impact on education in general. And one of the things that we're excited about is, I think STEM and Common Core are not struggling a little bit. They're sort of top-down initiatives, and the power of making with kids is it's really a grassroots thing that the kids want to make stuff. They want to build stuff, and so finding and creating environments for kids to do that is kind of the broader mission that I think makers in general and the maker community is excited about bringing to life in the form of whether it's TechShop or maker spaces in your schools or community-based maker spaces. Those are really the on-ramps, I think, for kids to learn to be makers.
What if we don't have a maker space in town? What if you're outside of Dallas and there's no access? That's what seems to have happened in Ahmed's case, right?
Yeah,
well, we're going to fix that over time. Right? So that may be true today, but it's already very clear. It's like 1/3 of all the libraries in the United States have already raised their hand and said, we want to have a maker space. Yep. There are 140,000 libraries. We're talking like 38,000 spaces have said, we want to have a 3D printer and some hand tools and so forth. So it's a temporary problem. I think the good news is at least we're headed in the right direction. We ripped the metal shop and the wood shop out of all the junior high and high schools over the last 20 years, and now it's going to come back, and it's going to come back in spades. And the reason is these tools are easy to use, they're very powerful, and they're relatively cheap. And so the on-ramp to learn how to make is actually lower today than it's ever been in all of human history. So that's, it's a wonderful time. We just need to get moving a lot faster.
Mm-hmm. Well, what happened in the past? Maybe Mark or you, Greg, you can address this. What happened in the past, say, 20 years that has pulled the metal shop out of the schools? Why would they? Have you had any direct experience with maybe?
Yeah, well, we got really focused on sending everybody to college. I mean, that's the No Child Left Behind, the current Common Core, all of that is focused on getting kids to college, and it turns out that means half of the kids in high school are in a program that's inappropriate for them. And that's a problem. Earlier we had legal issues, and some of the machines weren't quite as safe as they needed to be, and so people got afraid. And anytime you have adults that are afraid, it turns out to be a bad thing for kids. Mm-hmm. So we ripped those tools out. We're focusing on college-bound kids, and it's simply not right. Right now, you can go through a CNC training program in about 8 weeks that'll land you a $60,000 to $80,000 job right here at Tesla, operating a CNC machine. You do not need to go to college to get a middle class job, particularly with some of these new advanced tools.
Yeah, I mean, I think this separation of head work and hand work is something that's been going on for a long time, and I think people are realizing that those things actually can be brought back together in a really important way, and that, you know, doing things with your hand, I think it is something that's important and intrinsically satisfying part of human nature to build stuff, you know, and so finding ways to encourage kids and create opportunities for kids to build stuff is a big opportunity, and I think, yeah, this, what do you call it, project-based learning, there's a lot of different names for it, but I think there's a growing recognition that it is important. But, you know, a lot of it comes down to resources. How do you get more maker spaces into more schools so that it is broadly accessible, so people can take advantage of these incredibly powerful and relatively cheap, but still, you know, not free opportunities to learn to be a maker.
Because I just wrote a post called Make and Tell, and it would be a goal of mine if it even took off even a little, if we could just have kids bringing in the things that they made at home.
Yeah.
And the fact that kids are making things at home is important in the first place. So they should come to the tech shop. They should make cool stuff. They should learn how to do it from you guys.
Yeah, we have a school maker fair program, so we're encouraging schools all over the world really to run their own maker fairs.
And they should 3D print it with you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're available everywhere already, and
Okay.
you know, kids do. We find, you know, people as young as 10 years old that figured out how to use 3D software and create their own cover for their iPod Touch that they're using, or, you know, they make their own little toys or additions to toys. So it's already happening, and actually some of them are entrepreneurial enough to start selling those things.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
And you have a new customizer thing, right? Something like that?
Yeah. Yeah, so, you know, for a while, Shapeways was really good at, if you were a designer, you could upload your own stuff and buy it. And then we had the marketplace where you could buy the product someone else has come up with. But to me, there was a huge gray area in the middle where, you know, we all want to customize things we see. We at least, you know, put our own logo or our name on it, or we want to enable people to make things exactly as they wanted. And it was hard, if you saw something you liked, to make it exactly the way you wanted it. And so we're really excited that we now launched the first version of what we call Custom Maker, where a designer can indicate how an end user can customize his or her design by indicating, by, you know, just dragging with your mouse on the object in the browser, and say, look, here I want the end user to be able to add text. Here you can upload an image, and pretty soon that will be more profound than that, like, you know, changing the shape of something or combining items.
So it's an uploader and an editor.
Yes,
So
all online.
In terms of that, let's talk a little bit about the business of hardware, the hardware making. You guys, TechShop is home to a bunch of makers. You actually have some toys that you brought.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've now got 8 locations. We've had hundreds of companies that have come out. This was one of my favorites. Patrick Buckley came in and asked, what classes do I need to take to make an iPad case out of bamboo and bookbinding? 90 days later, he had sold $1 million in product. He did $4 million in the first year, $10 million in the second, $35 million in the third. And actually, the President of the United States carries one of these cases. And he's right here in Dogpatch. He's got like 25 employees, a manufacturing facility, saved a bookbinding business. Kind of most famously, Square came out of a Menlo location. So James McKelvey came in, learned how to use a mill, learned how to use a lathe, learned the basic electronics, built the prototype, and then used that to raise $10 million in their Series A. And he'll tell you that this would not have gotten done if TechShop hadn't existed. And he only spent a few $1,000s. One of my current favorite companies is in Pittsburgh. So this is a shout out to the ladies at Trust. It's 4 engineers. They're now part of an accelerator called Alpha Gear Labs. And it's a bra that's designed for women with large cup sizes. So this is actually a real world problem. It turns out, evidently, if you have a large breast, all of the weight, like 90% plus of the weight, goes on the straps up above. And so what these engineers have done is they've engineered a truss system to be able to shift the weight down to the rib cage and the spinal cord where it belongs. Now, so they raised $40,000 on their Kickstarter campaign. They've been on like ABC, and they're in this accelerator. And this is what I love about the whole maker movement. It pins the corners. You want to do a robot, you want to launch a CubeSat into outer space, you go right ahead. You want to start a little tchotchke company to sell things on the street corner, you want to work on fabric, and you want to get into fashion, you can do all of those things in this movement.
Okay. And what do you guys, in terms of hardware startups, how has Make changed over the years? Because Make used to be, generally Make used to be exactly what he said, like send a CubeSat up into space. I remember Popular Mechanics, when I used to read it a long time ago, they'd give you plans for like a robotic lawnmower and things. Have you guys had a more, I guess, enterprise bent now? You're moving into thinking about hardware startups?
Well, certainly there's a much greater enterprise interest in the maker movement. I think our mission hasn't really changed, which is about inspiring and developing makers. Make Magazine published the first issue 10 years ago. The first Maker Fair was the following year. And I think we continue to see, our role is to bring makers together. And it's really, I think, the sharing of ideas and experiences and skills that is one of the most interesting things about the current sort of maker movement and the hardware innovation that's coming out of it. I think, this idea that it's open and collaborative is really special and an important part. The community aspect of it is something that we spend a lot of time thinking about how to foster that part of it. Not so much necessarily any particular technology or innovation, but how do we bring folks together? But it is interesting, to see the larger companies want to participate in the maker movement, whether it's larger tech companies or consumer companies, because they recognize how exciting and dynamic and interesting, this world is.
Mm-hmm.
I fully agree. I mean, one of the reasons why when we launched Shapeways was to set up community features around it is because I truly believe that when you have a few people who figure it out and they show what they're doing, then other people can go like, oh, hey, I can do this too. And what we found by now is that 60% of the users on Shapeways, 60% of the 600,000 people actually taught themselves how to use 3D software. Now, any of you have ever tried that? It's not easy, but still 60% of our community has taught them, and they did that because they're so inspired by others and what they're doing, whether it's like making jewelry or making things for your train hobby or whatever. I do agree that a community and then giving people the tools to communicate what they're doing. One of my favorite threads is It Arrived, where people just simply showcase what they're getting. And if you read the passion and then also the questions from others, like, hey, how did you do this? Maybe I can use what you've done in a different context. So many good examples come from that. So I do agree that inspiration and then also the sharing, right? We talk a lot about education. We have loads and loads, tutorials, going out doing Skillshare classes. I'm actually thinking about how to set up a program where we teach the teacher about 3D modeling for 3D printing, because this is a new way of making things. We need to not only figure out how to model, but also figure out how to create new products for a new way of making things. And setting up classes for that and teaching a whole new generation of designers to make exciting new products that look totally different is definitely an exciting thing to be working on.
So let's go back down this line. We have a couple minutes left. What do entrepreneurs like these guys need to start making hardware, and why should they want to make hardware? A lot of the things are services out here. Today's Hardware Alley, it's my favorite alley, but it's actually improved over the years as TechCrunch Disrupt has gotten bigger and a little bit more popular. We're having a lot more hardware out there. But what should an entrepreneur look at if they're looking into hardware, and why should they look into hardware, if you guys want to go down?
Well, first of all, we still live in a physical world, right? I mean, I love software. I write my own code, but at the same time, we live in a physical world. And if you make hardware products, these are things that people use and carry around with them and actually get passionate about as well. So I think the reason why we haven't seen as much of that in the past is that starting a hardware company was incredibly difficult. There were so many barriers. Mass manufacturing made it really good for the big companies, but incredibly difficult for entrepreneurs who wanted to start their own. And I think that barrier is now coming down. I think the new ways of making things, efforts like TechShop, we are together making it much easier again for people to think, hey, I want to start a business, but I want to make physical products. Mm-hmm. Let's reduce the time to go to market. Let's reduce the amount of money needed. Let's make education available everywhere where people can get it, so whoever wants to can. And I think that's why I'm also so passionate about what we're doing. because we're fully enabling that, and I see that every day.
All right. Gregg?
Yeah, I mean, why should you start a hardware company? Because you can. It's exciting. It's fun. I mean, there's a whole world of problems that can now be solved by individuals or small groups of people that, you know, in the past, because of the requirements for machinery or software or capital or what have you, you know, those requirements have been, you know, not completely done away, but certainly dramatically reduced. So the opportunity for entrepreneurs to experiment and play and do cool things in hardware is, you know, relatively new, and it's getting easier all the time. It's definitely not easy, but I think you should do it and be excited about it, because you can now solve problems that I think were hard to solve, you know, maybe 10 years ago.
But they probably shouldn't be making...
Don't recommend clocks and
bazookas?
and bazookas, no.
What do you think, Mark?
Well, let me quote Chris Anderson when he left Wired magazine to start 3D Robotics, the drone company. He did a speech here locally, and at the end of it he said, if you thought the internet was big, this is going to be way bigger. And then Deloitte has done a study, and their estimate is that the hardware revolution is going to be 4 to 8 times larger and have more of an impact than the internet. You know, that thing that we spend a lot of time doing software for. So the reality is we live in physical space. I don't wear a virtual shirt. I don't wear virtual socks. I don't eat virtual food. I don't drive in a virtual car. I don't ride on virtual streets. The reality is the physical world is fundamentally larger than the virtual world. And as we go into the Internet of Things, the marriage between the two is going to be amazing. Deloitte also suggested that by, I think it's like 2030, half of us would be working in very small firms or for ourselves. So if you want to prepare yourself for the job of the future, to be able to create your own work, you need to get into hardware. You need to understand how to actually manufacture and make things, because that's where the largest markets are in the world.
All right. Gregg, Mark, Peter, thank you very much. This is my favorite stuff. I love this stuff. Do you guys like these guys?
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, John.
All right. Good night, Cleveland.